friends. It's Kimberly again here with Specialty Care Management. Glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about just a couple of points here, and uh, mainly we're going to focus on the difference between a target in terms of what's a normal for a blood sugar and what's a goal. There's a big difference, and your nurse coach might not be starting off with bringing you into a normal blood sugar range, but more of bringing you into a goal range, which doesn't necessarily mean normal. So we're going to talk about that today. And we're also going to talk about what is this concept of high and low glycemic index foods, and why is this an important consideration as we work to bring our blood sugars into your target range. Typically there's a couple of ways that we measure blood sugars, right? In terms of effectiveness, in terms of, helping you make sure that you're keeping your sugars in a normal range. So one thing that you might have heard before that you might be tracking is your A1C. Remember that an A1C is a 3-month average, a rear view mirror look, if you will, at what the average blood sugars have been over the last 3 months, right? So that's a lot like, it's an important measure, right? But it's a lot like driving down the road, but looking behind you, right? Driving down the road going forward, but only looking in your rear view mirror, right? Hard to decide how you're going to turn or what you need to do in the moment if that's the only viewpoint you have is looking behind you while you're going forward. It's an important measure. It's like a report card, right? It basically tells you how well you're doing from the work that you've already done. A finger stick or a fasting blood sugar, or even like a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, those in the moment readings, that's the information you need if you're driving forward, right? Your random or fasting, the blood sugars that you do in the moment, the ones that you're checking before meals, that's the information you need to make decisions as you're driving forward down the road, right? And that's really, really important. Now, a normal blood sugar is somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 110 is a normal blood sugar. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good target or a good goal for you. You and your nurse, and in particular your physician, will establish what a good target is or goal range. And in general, most of the time, docs are looking to keep you anywhere from a 90, 100 to 130. And in general, if you control your blood sugars to where they don't go higher than 130, that's a really great place to be. Doesn't mean that's normal. It means it's a good place to be to mitigate some of the damage that can be done with sugars that are too high, right? It's not normal, but it's a great target. Keep in mind that, really what we're talking about in terms of what's doing all the damage to your kidneys. One of the reasons why it sneaks up on people is because we don't feel bad when the sugars are a little high. And sometimes they just creep up slowly, so you don't even notice, right? Kind of like the frog. We put a frog in a pot of water and we gradually heat it up. He doesn't even know before, what's going on until he boils, right? It's kind of like that. We progress so gradually. It's insidious. It's sneaky. We don't feel bad till we're in the hospital with a coma kind of thing. I've seen people walk into an ER with sugars of 800. Sugar of 400 is enough to put you into a coma. Doesn't mean that it puts everybody into a coma, right? But those are really high blood sugars that cause a lot of damage, and some of that damage can't be reversed, right? So what we're looking for is to really get stabilized blood sugars. And as you're checking your blood sugars, if they're all over the board with a wild range, a lot of variability, that's a wide spread, right? A wide range. That's really damaging for your kidneys. And what we want to do is bring it in a tighter range, right? We don't want to see this highs and lows. If you're swinging from 50 for a low and 500 for a high, I've seen people swing variations like that in a 24-hour period. They do not feel good. They have lots of problems. So we don't want to see this. We want to see this, right? It's not normal to have a regular steady blood pressure or blood sugar any more than it is to have the same blood pressure reading after reading, right? It's our blood moves and circulates and changes, right? We're not static creatures. So it's not that it has to be, exact, but we want to see it in a nice tight range, right? That's very healthy. So this is very individual. You want to work with your physician. Your nurse coach will absolutely help facilitate that conversation so that you really know, hey, doc, what's a good target for me? A great conversation to have with your physician or your healthcare provider, your prescriber, right? It's going to be something like, hey, doc, I'm working with this nurse coach now, and I'm really motivated to bring my sugars in control. I have a goal. I'd like to put my blood sugar, my diabetes in remission. Working with you, my nurse coach has me tracking my blood sugars. Here's what my blood sugars have been for the last 2 weeks. I'd really like to, fax this in or call this in or have my nurse get this to your office every couple of weeks so that, you can see how I'm doing. And, I'd really like to be able to get off some of my meds, if I can do that with your help. What do you think would be a good range for me right now to shoot for? And gradually bringing that down. So if you're starting off where, as you look at your blood sugar log and you see that, most of the time you're in the 200s, then a good goal is to be, let's get that down under 150. If I can get my blood sugars where they don't drop under 100 and they don't go higher than 150, that's a tight range. Or 90 to 150, I'm going to feel pretty good about myself. Now keep in mind, if I'm used to cruising at 250 for my average blood sugar, and I all of a sudden drop down to a 90, or 100, even though that's a normal blood sugar, I'm not going to feel good, right? It's too fast of a drop. That's why we're looking for that tight range. So if I'm used to cruising 200, 220s, a good goal for me to where I feel good and I'm safe, right, might be to, let me see if I can get that, somewhere between 90 and 150. From there, once I've mastered that and I never go, higher than 150, then a good goal for me might be, well, I wonder if I can go from, maybe 90 to 130 or 80 to 130. Let me see how I do there. Once I hit that goal, now my goal might be, let me see if I can knock that sucker down to 70 to 110 and get in a more normal range. And once we're in a normal range, now keep in mind, if you're keeping track of your blood sugars and you're submitting those to your physician, and we're happy to help with that. You want to shoot us you can snap a picture and we're happy to fax that into your provider's office for you, however you want to get that. A lot of times docs, their nurses will take it over the phone. A lot of physicians now will take text, so you can text them a picture. We're happy to do that for you as well. But what happens is, as you start to have some lower blood sugars, doctor's going to say, oh, you know what, we need to cut back on the insulin for you because we don't want you to get a low, right? Or pretty soon you're done with insulin. We don't need insulin anymore. Now, you know what, maybe it's time for us to try you off of one of your oral medications. But that's the power of tracking. When you're keeping tight track of your blood sugars, you're checking your blood sugars before every meal. Maybe you're checking them before bedtime at least once in a while, and you're submitting those records with what you eat to the physician. A physician knows that you're on it and that you're safe, right? And then they're likely, I haven't seen a doctor who hasn't worked with a patient who's working like that. They absolutely want to help you achieve those goals and bring diabetes in remission. Oftentimes I hear from people who are working through this kind of process that they go in to see their provider for a checkup, and the provider tells them, well, shoot, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. That always tickles me because we know what you're doing. You're doing lots of great work, and it's going to show up for you in your labs. So that's the real key there is to, we're going to get a tight control. We're not looking to bring sugars down all at once. We want control, right? Runaway blood sugars and uncontrolled blood sugars is what's going to really cause a lot of damage to every organ in the body. The tighter the control you have, the more power you have to put your blood sugar where you want it and get that runaway train under control. Okay. So, and the A1C in general, what we're looking for, the way that we measure in order to tell if you've got good control of your blood sugar is if that A1C is between 6 and 7. That's a health. Now, that's not a normal A1C. That's a goal A1C. Somebody who does not have blood sugars, those folks have an A1C under 5.7 or so. And as the A1C climbs, once you have an A1C of somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 5.7 to 6.3, 6.4, a lot of times some physicians are going to classify you as a diabetic. Some people then with an A1C like that, they're going to tell you they have prediabetes. By the time your A1C goes over 6.5, most of the time they're diagnosing you with diabetes. Now, keep in mind, I've seen folks with A1Cs of 13 and still no diagnosis of diabetes. So it's really important that you're watching out for these numbers and you know what questions to ask your doc. If I noticed on my lab that I had an A1C of 13, I would absolutely be asking my provider, what do you think about that A1C? Should I be worried about that? Why or why not? Should I be on some kind of a medication for that? Why or why not? Those are important questions, right? Most docs are going to diagnose you and get you into the right treatment. But if you have questions, it's really important. This is your body, right? It's your responsibility to make sure that you're getting the right care that you have. Hard to do that if you don't know what to watch for and what questions to ask. And that's really where we want to help you shine so that you can get the most out of the visit with your provider that you can. So let's talk for a minute about, what is a glycemic index and why you would want to take that into consideration as you're planning your day's meals, as you're moving through your day. So when you hear the reference glycemic index, this has reference to how fast a food will have an effect on your blood sugar in terms of how fast is it going to raise the blood sugar after you eat it. So some foods have a high glycemic index. Some foods have a low glycemic index. High glycemic index foods are foods that burn like kindling. We've talked a little bit about that before. I was going to start a fire, right? I'm going to start with some newspaper, some dry tinder, some kindling, because it's going to burn real hot, real fast, have a high effect, right? A high glycemic index food burns like kindling, burns real hot, real fast. Now, if I wanted to heat my home with a fireplace with wood heat, and all I had available was kindling, okay, in order to keep my fire going, I couldn't leave the fire. I'd have to sit there and feed it kindling continuously. Otherwise, my fire is going to go out. The other thing that happens, coming from the north, if all I feed my fire is kindling, the room gets really hot, really fast, and it's not a comfortable temperature for people to hang around in. If, on the other hand, every, say, 4, 5, 6 hours, I throw a log on the fire, I can start a fire in November and I can keep it burning until May and never have to light another fire, right? As I throw a log on the fire every so often, then what happens is I have a continuous burn and the room stays nice and temperate. I can go to town, I can go do my shopping, I can step away from it and do other things and come back and still find a nice warm home, right? It's lower maintenance to do that. So some foods burn like kindling. They have a high glycemic index. Some foods burn like a log. These are foods that are said to have a low glycemic index. They're not going to cause a big spike in the blood sugar. They're going to have a nice, low, steady burn. This is really important when it comes to, if you remember, our goal was to get away from this kind of wide variation in our blood sugars and get it under a tighter control. We do this by making sure that we're throwing a log on our fire every so often. Logs are like your proteins and fats, foods that take a long time to turn into sugar. Remember, everything you eat regardless of what it is, your body's job is to turn that into sugar, right? Low glycemic index foods are going to burn for a long time. It takes a long time to turn a piece of steak into sugar. Whereas a Twinkie, I think I can just suck on it and it instantly turns to sugar, right? If I wanted to choose, like say, for instance, I wanted an apple, I could choose a raw whole apple. I could choose applesauce, or I could choose apple pie, right? Which one do you think is going to turn into sugar the fastest, right? I've got to work a whole lot harder to break down my raw whole apple, peel and all, right? It's going to take longer to turn that into sugar than it is applesauce, right? A lot of chewing involved in that apple. Applesauce, I think I can just drink it. And honestly, I think if I just smell a piece of apple pie, it's going to raise my blood sugar, right? So choosing foods that take longer to turn into sugar are going to have a lower effect on my blood sugar and give me a more stabilized burn, right? So that means if we go back to the plate method, if you've watched that video on the plate method basically takes your plate. Actually, hold on. I'm going to get a picture of that. Here we are. So if I look at the plate method, okay, the plate method basically takes a 9-inch dinner plate, divides it in half. So you can see the top half is for my non-starchy kind of vegetables. Then I have a quarter of my plate that's for bread, starches, grains. And then I have the other quarter of the plate that's for meats, protein sources, right? Obviously, my protein is going to take longer to turn into sugar than my starches or my vegetables. Starches turn into sugar more quickly than vegetables do. Vegetables, particularly vegetables with the skin, take a lot longer to turn into sugar than my starches, my breads, my grains, right? And meats, fats, these take even longer. So as I'm choosing foods, as I'm putting my plate together, right, this is where really making sure that, you know, vegetables, the more raw whole I can get my vegetables, the better. It's going to take a lot longer to turn those into sugar. For bread, starches, and grains, keep in mind that, say, for instance, if we wanted to look at a potato, I could choose a whole baked potato. I could choose mashed potatoes. I can choose instant mashed potatoes. Remember that anything instant is instant because it's already partially broken down, right? So a bowl of instant mashed potatoes is going to turn into sugar a whole lot more quickly than my raw whole, my baked potato, right? So the more whole, the more in the natural state that the food choices we make, the longer in general, the longer it's going to take to turn those into sugar. For instance, if I was going to have some pasta, between you and me, I prefer whole wheat pasta, 100% whole wheat pasta. Has a rich, nutty flavor to it. And it's harder to turn that into sugar, and not a whole lot harder, but it is a little harder than your, heavily processed, your regular pasta. Keep in mind, for those of you that have advanced kidney disease, the whole grains also have a lot of phosphorus. So the rules change a little bit when you get into dialysis because of the phosphorus content. That's when you can get away with eating the instant mashed potatoes and the rice and Fruit Loops and crazy things that I would tell you to stay away from before. But if you don't have end-stage kidney disease, stage 4 kidney disease, then excuse me, then we really are looking at the more raw, whole, less processed foods. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. Remember that as you're making those food choices, we're not perfect. Thank goodness. I still can't walk across my pool, right? So it's the little victories that we have each day, the little choices. You might set a goal for yourself to have a piece of raw fruit every day. If you're eating, fruit out of a can, or you're stopping by for a piece of pie after dinner, maybe instead a better choice might be to have a piece of whole fruit. That's a great victory, right? Or perhaps if If you love instant oatmeal, maybe for you, a great goal might be to opt for the longer cook oatmeal, right? It's going to have a slightly lower glycemic index. So little steps, little victories, I promise you, absolutely add up to the big wins that we see. And it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. But as you're designing your day, as you're thinking about what you're going to eat, what you're going to maybe choose for a snack, what you're going to pack in your bag, because remember, one of our healthy hacks is to make sure, especially if you have diabetes, make sure that you have some easy, quick food sources available at all times, especially protein sources, right? That are easy and accessible. Otherwise, what happens is our blood sugars drop. And if you remember, if we go back to the pathophysiology at play, there's signaling that goes off. There's alarm bells that go off to the brain when the sugar drops. And it's likely going to guide you into a fast food place, which is not going to serve you. But if I carry in my briefcase or my purse a protein bar, maybe a boiled egg, maybe even a piece of beef jerky, keep in mind has a lot of salt, right? Your jerkies, your cheese, or they can be nice sources of protein, but they also can carry a lot of salt. So be careful about that. But a handful of nuts and seeds. I like to get my nuts and seeds from the baking aisle, no salted. But if I have those handy, a high quality protein bar, then if I notice that my blood sugar's dropping, it's a handful. It's all I need to throw another log on my fire before my fire goes out, right? And that's going to really help me make better choices in the moment because I'm prepared. And so I'm going to encourage you to think about little things like that that you can do. Maybe at your desk at work, you can keep a little bag of nuts and seeds. You can keep some protein bars or protein shakes on hand for sometimes it is busy. If you have a long commute and there's a traffic accident, your 15-minute drive could turn into an hour. And then what do you do if your sugar was a little bit low on your way home? Now you're in trouble, right? So things like that, upsets and changes in schedule, and which always happen, they never really take us off guard when we're prepared. It's when we're not prepared that we get thrown off of our game. And then once you get thrown off, sometimes we feel defeated. And then we kind of give up on things. Just know if that happens and you do get knocked off course, it's never too late to dust yourself off and get back on, right? Nobody's perfect. Life is hard enough. So please don't be hard on yourself. We believe in you a squillion %. We're here for you every step of the way. Now, later on in the module, you're going to hear some survival tips. What do you do around the holidays? Family reunions. Here, as I'm shooting the video, we're heading into summer. Summer months are fabulous, but they're also full of, maybe company picnics or family reunions and coleslaw and hot dogs and all those kinds of things that really can throw us for a loop. Or another big other holidays can do that as well. Thanksgiving, Christmas. Halloween is a big one for folks with diabetes. When the kids come around with their treats, oh my gosh, really? So let's talk about some strategies in another module that you can deploy to help you make sure that these kinds of things don't throw you off your game. Just know if you do, it's okay. We're not perfect. We're going to dust ourselves off and we're going to get right back on the horse, okay? In the meantime, take really good care of yourself. Live well. Until next time. Bye.